Good Lord, people didn't like this movie. The reviews are in and they are bad. The financial metrics for this film were abysmal. I feel like it was going to be in theaters for a lot longer than it was before they yanked it out and put it on streaming. And ugh, I have to start off with, if your problems with the Flash movie begin and end with the words Ezra and or Miller, I'm not going to do anything to change your mind here. I've been embroiled in a decades long debate with my wife about whether or not you can separate an artist from their art. And we flip flop constantly, especially with all the headlines recently of certain rappers and their opinions of certain religious groups. But we're always going back and forth of can you separate the two? Is there value in separating the two? If you can't, I'm not going to try to convince you differently here. What this video isn't me trying to change your mind about whether or not this film is good or bad. That is all subjective. What I'm here to do is convince you that at the least it's worthy of analysis. And if I do my job right, hopefully help you understand why I do like the movie as much as I do. But before we go anywhere, two housekeeping issues. One, I'm going to spoil the hell out of this whole movie. We're going to bust this thing apart. I'm going to do it briefly, so this isn't going to be a blow-by-blow of what happens, but to understand where my affection comes from, you do need to at least grasp the mechanics of the movie and why these things take place. Secondly, we're going to be talking about two forms of literary analysis. What is this, school? No, but I'm a nerd, so bear with me. There are two primary types of literary analysis that people use: textual and contextual. Textual analysis is literally everything on the page. All of the words, the punctuation, the pacing, how the words fit together, word choice. If we're using an analogy of a house, this is the actual house itself. How many walls does it have? How many floors? How many bathrooms? Are the windows storm windows or stained glass? Is the basement a big empty room, or is it finished? Or is it wet and stinky and it's really just for your hot water heater? Contextual analysis, if the analogy holds, is everything outside of the house. What do the neighbors look like? Do you have a backyard? What are the taxes like? Was there a war recently? Everything that isn't the physical structure itself. So if you're looking at textual analysis, words on the page. Contextual analysis is the environment in which those words exist. Look what I did with my hair. Isn't that weird? Let's go with it. So, textually, what does the Flash movie look like? Flash is a speed character for the DC universe. He can run really fast and control his body at super speeds. That's all you need to know about his power set. Super speed. He's in a lifelong battle to try to exonerate his father in the death of his mother. You see, when Barry was young, his mom forgot a key component to whatever lunch she was making on a Saturday, and it required a can of tomatoes. She forgot it at the grocery store and convinces Dad to go to the store and get tomatoes. Barry goes upstairs. Barry hears a scream. He runs downstairs and finds his mom dying, apparently at the hands of his father, but in Barry's eyes, he sees the look of his dad. The man's distraught. This is not something that Dad would have ever done. This event shapes Barry's life, and he goes into criminal investigation. Not really a full police officer, just the forensic side of things, which is what leads him to get his power when lightning strikes a bunch of experimental goo-gad nonsense. Well, Barry spends his whole life trying to get his dad off the hook, and it leads into the beginning of this movie where Bruce Wayne and Wayne Tech have accessed the security camera footage of the grocery store that day. Great! It's going to exonerate Dad. Everything's going to be perfect. Why did we even come to see this movie? Well, turns out Dad's got a baseball cap on right next to the tomatoes, and you can't see his face. Bummer. Barry, with his super speed powers, realizes, hey, I could just go back in time and fix this, right? Barry goes back in time to the grocery store that day, finds his mom, and slips in the can of tomatoes into her grocery cart so she doesn't have to send her husband out later in the day, so nobody dies. When Barry's coming back after successfully saving his mom, some weird, grotesque rock monster shoves Barry out of the time stream and he tumbles into the timeline of an alternate future that he created, the one where his mom didn't die. Barry is now in a whole different version of his world. The butterfly effect was crazy. Apparently, Barry's mom not dying changed whether or not Clark landed on Earth. Dumb, but okay. And there's an alternate version of himself who's never known the trauma of losing his mom, so it's just all snark fun times coming from this alternate version of Barry. From now on, I'll refer to them as Barry 1, the one who changed time, and Barry 2, dumb fun guy. Well, the two of them go on an adventure across this new timeline where they meet the Michael Keaton Batman, they meet this new Supergirl, because Superman never landed on Earth and General Zod from the Man of Steel movie is still looking for Clark and the Kryptonian codex in his blood. God, I hated Man of Steel. Flash goes on an adventure with the original Batman, the new Supergirl, and Barry 2, who has now Barry's superpowers. Don't worry about it. Watch the movie if you want to. It's not important. And it leads to this big climactic battle scene where Barry 2 is trying to save the life of Supergirl, but no matter how many times and how he tries to save Supergirl's life, she keeps dying no matter what. So Barry 1 is coming to a realization, oh my God, we can't save everyone. And Barry 2 saying, no, nobody has to die today. We're too fast. We can outrun death. And so Barry 2 keeps jumping into the timeline over and over again, trying to save Supergirl. But he keeps coming back a little more haggard, a little more tired. And now there are bits of shrapnel sticking in his body from the conflict with the Kryptonians that's happening. And he's getting grosser and grosser. And it's at this point you realize, oh God, that original rock monster that pushed Barry 1 out of the time stream, that's actually Barry 2. He created his own worst enemy by going back and trying to save his mom. First off, textually speaking, that's one of the cooler things I've ever seen in a superhero movie. I'm challenging you. Think to yourself for a second. When has there ever been a superhero movie where the villain of the tale is the literal personification of the main character's hubris? I mean, that's special in and of itself. The closest you could get is maybe Spider-Man 3 with the symbiote suit, but even then, the villain at the end of the movie isn't Peter Parker, but bad. It's Spider-Man fighting Venom, who is with the symbiote suit, and that's a whole villain thing. So close but no cigar. That's a unique villain. There is no real villain in the movie. It's actually the hero making dumb decisions. So how do they solve this conflict? We'll call the evil protrusion, time-pushing bad guy Flash Barry 3. Barry 2 sacrifices himself to kill Barry 3. So now we have our own hero using different parts of his own kind of learned experience and soul to kill different parts of himself so that he can be the hero. It's kind of wild the longer you think about it, but that's really special to me. That's a really neat way to tell a story. The hero is the villain and they themselves are the reason we're running into all these problems, and there isn't some villain that sneaks in at the last second. It is the hero that is the villain. That's good stuff. And the end of the story has this heartbreaking conclusion where Barry 1 realizes through the death of Supergirl that isn't it enough that we got to have mom for a little bit of time and she just can't come back. So to fix things, I have to put things right. Barry 2 sacrifices himself to kill Barry 3. And Barry 1 goes back to the grocery store and in a genuinely heartbreaking scene takes the tomato can out of his mom's cart, dooming her to die so that he can save everyone. That's harsh. Get some harsh browns, bro. Can I get some ketchup for these harsh browns? I can't imagine making that decision, and I don't think anyone can. And that to me is the true definition of a hero, whether or not you're willing to sacrifice, to make those big decisions. I don't know. It's not even sacrifice. Sacrifice is when you do something yourself. He straight up killed his mom to save the universe. That's heavy. Everything I just said, though, all of that mechanics, that is textual analysis of the story. That is the words on the page, what happened to who, how did it conclude. Your mileage may vary on that story. I think it's really cool, but if you think it's stupid and not worth your time, if you don't care about The Flash, that's fine. Again, I'm not here to convince you that this story is good. I'm here to convince you that it's worth analyzing. Contextual analysis, everything outside of the movie itself. This is where things get really interesting. The Flash took 10 years to make. Did you know that? It was announced way back in 2013, and it was a very different movie. They didn't know what they were making at the time. The production crew didn't know whether or not this was going to exist at the same time as like a JLA 2, or they had this cool chemistry with Batman and Flash. Was it going to be like a Peter Parker, Tony Stark kind of relationship? But as the years went on and the Snyderverse was more and more unsuccessful, the creators of this film actually saw their own branching timelines right in front of them. Was this going to be a sequel? Was this going to be a prequel? Was this going to tie in other DC franchises that they hadn't made yet? Nobody really knew, and it feels like they didn't know either. So this is an example of art really imitating life. But the biggest blow came in 2003 when David Zaslav was announced as the new head of a merged studio of Time Warner Brothers, and Discovery. And now they became one enormous company with a mission statement of, we need to get these DC movies on track to be Marvel movies. We're going to emulate their style. We're going to fix things. We're going to do things new. And we can't have them be like they used to. So we're going to reboot everything. Figures that DC would find their solution in a reboot. They made the announcement that they had poached James Gunn over from the Marvel universe, and he was going to come to DC and be DC's Kevin Feige. So Kevin Feige for Marvel is now James Gunn for DC, and everyone's so excited. Problem is, moving forward, DC needs to have its own distinct identity and direction. So they have to make a clear delineation between what came before James Gunn and what's coming after James Gunn. So things like the CW shows, those are a goner. Things like Snyderverse Justice League, things like the old Superman movies, all of those are going to be relegated to kind of like small pocket universes in their own thing. It's not going to be one cohesive universe. It can't be. They're presenting this as a new brand effectively to a whole new audience of viewers. They can't keep making callbacks to TV shows and movies that are like, some of them literally 40 years, 50 years old at this point. Some of them 70 years old, for crying out loud. Now we have to go back to the textual analysis for a second, because I skipped over the most important part that bridges the textual analysis and contextual analysis of The Flash to where they really become something special to me. During the climactic scenes of the movie, when Barry 3 has been revealed to be Barry 2, and Barry 2 is realizing, oh my god, I became a monster, the stakes get ramped up. And we start to see all the different multiverses in the sky coming in, converging, and showing how it's not just Barry 1 and Barry 2's worlds at stake. It's not just trying to save their mom anymore. It's the whole of the multiverse is at risk, and it's coming apart at the seams. And it's at this moment that an actual stroke of genius befell the creators of this film. We see all the cameos come in, and we get Linda Carter's Wonder Woman from the TV show. Adam West Batman's back. George Reeves Superman from the 1952 serialized black and white TV show, which, in a weird connection, that story was told in a feature film starring none other than Ben Affleck. So Weird connection. We even get an appearance of a Superman movie that never got made with Nicolas Cage and a spider fighting, and it's a whole inside joke with Kevin Smith. If you haven't seen the Kevin Smith interview where he talks about how he was pitched writing the Superman movie, please, dear God, go watch that video. Look it up. Kevin Smith, Superman story, and he tells an amazing story about a spider. But most importantly, and most touching to me, we even got Christopher Reeve and Helen Slater from the movie Supergirl standing shoulder to shoulder in a sequel we never got. That's Christopher Reeve, not Reeves, you poor Mandela-affected brain. And they don't fight. Linda Carter, Adam West, Christopher Reeve, George Reeves. Nobody throws a punch. Nobody helps out the heroes. This isn't a crossover event. They're not here to fight. They're just here to bear witness. It was in that moment the movie became something great when you consider the context. James Gunn taking over the DC universe meant that everything that came before is a goner. There's no more stories going to be told with Christopher Reeve or Adam West or Linda Carter or George Reeves or Helen Slater. They're all going away. In that moment, The Flash, this movie that has a 50% review score across the board on Metacritic, became a goodbye love letter to every live action DC property that's ever existed. And that just, whew, you want to talk about feelings I forgot I had? I was too young when Christopher Reeve died. I was too young to appreciate it. I was raised on Superman just as everybody who read comic books did. Don't lie. I was raised on that movie, and it's a special movie, and it's still the best superhero movie I've ever seen, and that video will absolutely come out. I wasn't old enough to understand what that meant. I wasn't old enough to say goodbye, and this movie gave me that chance. It folded in a goodbye to all of the previous heroes that came before into this movie that is now the end point for every live action DC property we've ever seen. Disney bought Marvel Comics. Everybody with a heartbeat on the planet knows that. And Disney's never going to give Marvel a good death. Marvel Comics, the brand, is going to exist literally forever. Your children are going to inherit Marvel movies. Mantles are going to get passed on. Characters are going to get recast. Stories are going to get retold. I might be 60, but I will see a remake of the Infinity Gauntlet story at some point in time, and you will too. We're seeing it with how Disney's handling Star Wars. They're going to rehash, retell, remake, and redo until the end of time. The Flash found itself at a really interesting crossroads where the entire company is moving in a new direction. And so rather than just make the movie they were going to make anyway, cash the check and move on, or even worse, like they did with Batgirl, just cancel the movie entirely and do a tax write-off. They used it as an excuse to give us an ending. The journey is where you learn the lessons. The journey is where you lose the girl, get the job, win the lottery. The ending of the story is where you reflect on those lessons and actually grow from them. Endings are really important. It's one of the reasons why when the new Spider-Verse movie came out, some people were pissed off because they're like, that wasn't an ending. That wasn't fulfilling. Because it was building into another endless stream of sequels. Just like these DC movies coming up are going to. It's going to be an endless stream of sequels. I have faith that James Gunn will tell better stories than Marvel does. But still, endings are where we grow. And this Flash movie gave an ending to everything that I grew up with. And it hurt, man. It hurt in a good way. I got to witness my childhood have a good death. Nobody gets that. but they manufactured one because they found themselves in the right place at the right time. It's funny, I'm talking about endings and I don't know how to end this thought. Because of how The Flash handled its ending, it is now the de facto conclusion to all of those DC properties. If you have a marathon and you go watch all of the old Christopher Reeve Superman movies, you should end it with The Flash. If you have a marathon and you watch all the Adam West 66 Batman show, you should end it with The Flash. The Flash has become the capstone on the entire DVD collection that you can have in your house. And it's kind of remarkable. DC Comics is never going to end. Marvel Comics are never going to end. Star Wars is never going to end. They're going to keep making new things so that they can cash in on our nostalgia. But we got an ending here. And it's sad. And I love it. Yeah. Love you, bye.